Well, hello again, friends. Welcome back, and welcome back to the Fire Pit. Richard here, and it's great to be back to talk with you again for another Fire Pit conversation. It felt right. It felt good to come back to the pit this time around for a conversation. This probably will be from here on out. It just feels right being able to share from this space. I love this space, this circle where a lot of good things happen, a lot of great conversations, a lot of good times with the men in my circles, with my family, and some real redemptive time that happens here in this area. So welcome back to the Fire Pit for a conversation. So it's so good to be here. It's a beautiful fall day, sunny fall day. That sun is so bright. And my canopy's disappearing as the leaves keep falling. But man, it's a beautiful time of year. The weather feels fantastic out here today. So thank you for joining me here. So and I hope that each of these videos, if you haven't seen any of the past Fire Pit conversations, I encourage you to go back and just listen to them. Our last episode where I talked about suffering, talk about the suffering that we all have to deal with, but the way God is in the middle of that all the time, which is a very important thing to remember in the midst of all the struggles that we continue with, that we have in this life. It's a big part of who we are and a big part of the way we live. It's the universal language, as I talked about in the last episode, but it's important to remember that God is always in the middle of that with us. Whether we realize it or not, that he's always with us. So where I wanted to go this week, and this is something that's just been fresh, some fresh thoughts, as well as some things that I've been reading as well. I mentioned the book that Instruments in the Redeemer's Hands that I've been reading through, Paul David Tripp, a very good read, helpful read for me. That was gifted to me beginning of 2023, and so finally taking the time to dive through it. But a month ago, me and some friends, we had the chance to join our friends at Zoe for the Heart of Warrior Encounter. Zoe, they came down to Georgia, to Sharp Top Cove, and we got to spend a few days with them as a part of that weekend, and we actually felt it was a very important thing for us, for our mission, to join forces. We firmly believe in being a part of and walking hand in hand together in all this. We're not ministries against one another, or brothers and men against one another. No, we are on the same team. We are on the same mission, going after the hearts of men and wanting to see men oriented and alive in their lives and their walk with Christ and with their families, the way they lead their homes, their wives, their children, and because the great impact of that is and what that can mean for their families and for so many more is absolutely amazing. And many of us on both teams, we feel we've seen it happen firsthand, whether in our own families or those around us, and so we firmly believe in the mission. So it was so beautiful and so awesome to be a part of that weekend with the guys at Zoe, Michael Thompson, S.J. Jennings, Greg Sailors, and Gary Barklow from the Noble Heart, and Tom Benner, and so many others that were there with us, and just love that group, love that community, and so thankful to be allied with them in this mission. So, and over the course of this weekend, again, I know I've shared this before, but that weekend was also a great chance for me personally to have an opportunity to just spend time myself with God and really walk through some needed things, some things I needed to walk through with Him, some grieving that needed to happen over the things that have happened in our family, with the illness Amber suffered with a year ago, and it was just a big healing aspect of it. But the big part of those weekends, friends, and what I really wanted to dive into is this whole idea of the encounter. Their weekend, they call it the Heart of a Warrior Encounter. Ours is the Anvil boot camp, and we call it a boot camp because I pulled that title, that boot camp piece from Wild at Heart boot camps. That was a big part of how my journey started. That's how a lot of us started in this mission and this journey after the hearts of men. And the big piece of it all, no matter what you call it, is that it is all about creating a space where men can encounter God, right? And how important that is for each one of us. Each of our lives gets so enamored and busy and crazy than the day to day. Like the last year was, there was a lot of things that I needed to walk through, that a lot of things I was struggling with, and I needed the space myself just to spend that time with God. I knew God was leading me there to make that time, but I hadn't made the time to do so. So that weekend was a perfect opportunity for that. We do the Anvil weekends, all about creating that space for men to really spend time encountering God, to spend time in conversation and communion with God, to wrestle some deep-seated questions about their lives, about their hearts, about where they've been, what agreements they've been building with, who they felt that they were, who they thought they were, but who God says that they are, receiving some healing from Christ, allowing God to love them in that place, maybe for the first time in their lives, and orienting men into walking out the trueness of their identity and discovering who they are in the eyes of God, in the eyes of the Father, and realizing that their identity as a beloved son is the most important thing about them, that they are loved by God, that they have been called beloved by God through Jesus Christ. So how do we do that, right? How do we create that space? So the big part of the weekend, we walked men through some very important teaching. Obviously, you have to be able to guide it in some way. So men tend to spend time in sessions, hearing speakers share about different important topics, orienting them to those different things I was talking about, whether it's the whole aspect of the larger story, maybe where they lived as a false self, understanding who the false self is in themselves, and how do they find healing from that and learn to step away from that piece and that part of their lives. Those are just examples of that. But the other aspect of that is now giving men questions, like to really spend time in solitude, one-to-one with God, and just asking God those deep questions, like, God, who do you say that I am? God, who I believe that I have been? What identity have I lived under? What names have I lived under? What is my effect on people? Again, it's all about spending that time with God. So creating that space, what we do when we're away in these wilderness locations at these camps, there's no other distractions. There's nobody else around. We're not meant to be inundated with our cell phones, with our work, with our email, all those things, text messaging. It's just meant for time with God. And it's important because, in all honesty, most of us don't spend time day to day making that time to spend time with God, making that time to commune with Him, to even encounter Him. Like sitting in a space like this was my sanctuary, if you will, sitting here at this fire pit. And I would spend time day after day in the morning, especially with God, just sit, whether it's sitting in silence or praying or talking with God or whatever, but just being there, being in God's presence in this environment. This has been a holy consecrated space for that, for my personal life. But with everything I've walked through and struggled with, especially in the last year, this is not a thing I've taken advantage of, and it's very easy for life to get in the way of that important time. So what do we do with that? That's where these weekends, these boot camps, these encounter weekends are hugely, hugely important. It's not about finding all the answers to your life, finding everything and getting everything corrected and fixed, and then you go home and everything's going to be perfect. It's not about that. Never works that way. If that were the case, I would have been fixed and healed and never had to struggle in the last 9 years since the first time I stepped into one of those weekends. So it doesn't work that way, but it's an orienting time to begin the process, kind of the starting gate, if you will, of beginning to wrestle with some deep things that you can then take home with you to continue to walk with, to continue to commune with God in. And that's the orienting, is making that a practice, helping men make that a practice in their lives, making that a part of their day. So that's the important thing, right? And some of this reading that I'm walking through with Paul David Tripp, talks about this idea of encounter, this idea of creating those spaces where in the environment where people can find healing, and what that's meant to be. Because change is a needed part in most all of our lives in some way, especially for those of us that either are maybe new to the faith, or maybe we've walked in the faith for a long time, but we've been so static and had no movement. Like we felt like maybe we got that salvation piece down, but we didn't know where to go from there, and we've just been on cruise control, right? So he talks about in here when he's referencing Paul from Colossians, excuse me, but he talks about Paul's view of change involves a process as well as content, the manner as well as the message. That involves teaching with my life as well as with my words. As I incarnate the character of the Lord, I am calling people to trust and obey. So, in effect, Paul is saying, if you're going to teach and admonish one another, you must first put on Christ. God changes people not simply because you have spoken truth to them, but because those words were said with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience and love. So that's important in the way we approach these weekends and the way we talk to people is that being able to incarnate Jesus through what we share, not just speaking truth, but really showing how this is a real part in our own stories and our own narratives. Where he also talks about keeping Christ central, that the most important encounter in ministry is not the person's encounter with us. Like, so us that at these weekends that are up maybe on the stage teaching or talking or sharing, it's not about that, right? But it's with his encounter with Christ. Our job is simply to set up that encounter so that God would help people seek his forgiveness, comfort, restoration, strength, and wisdom. And that's the important thing. So it's not about any one of us that are up on that stage. We believe in the message. We believe in what we teach because we know there's a real opportunity for healing and redemption to happen in those spaces. So our job is creating that environment, setting up the space so that men can really encounter God in a real way. And that becomes the most important aspect of everything that they walk through and that you walk through when you step on those grounds at an Anvil weekend or at a Heart of a Warrior or at a Wild at Heart boot camp or whatever it is. Any weekend that is designed for that purpose. It is all about the space to encounter God, right? Yes, there's fellowship, there's fun, there's things that happen over the course of the weekend as well, where you get to spend time and have some fun with the people around you. Maybe you've gone with, we had the joy of going with many of the men in my circle. All went up together and spent the time of this weekend together. We were bunked together and all that, which was an awesome thing. But that one-to-one time with God is hugely and vastly important. So I wanted to be able to share on that today and share just how important that is. That it's never about any one of us. It's never about myself or Steve or Greg or Chris or John or when we're up there when we're sharing about this. Or we just simply tee up the opportunity for that you can then spend some real time with God and conversate with him in a deep way. So friends, I hope this was helpful. I hope this was a helpful time, and I'll share more about this, and you'll hear more about this and from the team as well. You'll see some other conversations and discussions and videos that each of us will talk about those important topics that we walk through, but also why they're important to go through. So again, I hope this was a helpful thing to understand and help understand where we come from as a ministry and as a fellowship, to where we just want to see you freed up. We want to see your heart come alive. We want to see you be able to walk with God and be able to walk in real freedom, knowing that God is right there with you through all of it. So thank you again, friends, for joining me for this week's Firebreak Conversation. I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, take care. God bless.